Humanity has always harbored a primal aspiration to reach out with mortal hands and touch the brilliant sun. They crave light. They yearn for infinite energy to rewrite their fate, to escape the constraints of nature. But they have forgotten a cruel cosmic law: the brighter the light, the longer and darker the shadow it casts. And sometimes, what hides within that shadow is far more terrifying than death itself. In the Nevada desert of the United States, the scorching sun threatened to melt space itself. Waves of heat rose from the golden sands, blurring the horizon and turning distant mountain ranges into wavering, spectral mirages. Amidst this harsh and desolate landscape, a heavily fortified security fence bearing the sign Area 51, no trespassing, stood like a challenge to the outside world. But today, the master of this place was not the military or political secrets, but the greatest intellect on Earth. Deep underground, in a massive subterranean base reinforced with Kachin alloy, the hum of engines and the clack of mechanical keyboards echoed ceaselessly. Bulma Brief stood before a colossal machine towering 30 meters high. Blue light from the control panel illuminated her confident, eager face. She wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, her blue eyes burning with the fire of bottomless scientific ambition. Dad, look, the stats are stabilizing at 98%. We're almost there, Bulma shouted, her voice echoing through the metal dome, drowning out the rumble of the cooling system. Dr. Brief, with his familiar black cat perched on his shoulder, was busy adjusting pressure valves at the base of the machine. He looked up at his daughter, his usual gentle smile now tinged with a vague anxiety. Bulma, are you sure about hiding this power source? If Beerus-sama finds out we are meddling with eternal energy, he won't be pleased. This is the realm of the gods, Bulma scoffed, her fingers deftly typing a complex command sequence, ignoring her father's worry. Don't worry, Dad. I rented this entire godforsaken Area 51 just to stay out of his and Whis' sight. Besides, this is Omega energy. It's not a weapon. It's an eternal reactor. Once activated, it will provide free electricity for all of humanity. No more pollution. No more wars over resources. We are creating heaven right here on Earth. The machine before them, the Omega reactor, resembled a polyhedron floating in midair, held in place by rotating magnetic rings. Inside its core was a tiny but blinding point of light, like a captive star waiting to supernova. Initiating final phase, Bulma commanded decisively, her thumb pressing down hard on the bright red start button. A low sound began to resonate. It wasn't just physical sound, but a vibration at an ultra-low frequency, pressing against the chests of every staff member in the lab. The Omega core flared. The magnetic rings spun at dizzying speeds, sending arcs of white lightning crashing into the surrounding lightning rods. But what Bulma, with all her genius, could not foresee was the nature of this energy. To maintain eternity, Omega energy inadvertently emitted an inverse wave frequency, a type of invisible antimatter harmless to physics, but a screeching noise, a blasphemy to beings of divine status. It was like fingernails scratching a chalkboard, amplified billions of times and transmitted across dimensions, shattering the silence of the cosmos. Millions of light years away from Earth, on the planet of the god of destruction Beerus, the inherent peace was suddenly torn apart. The space here was usually tranquil, filled only with the sound of trickling water and peaceful birdsong. Whis, the angel attendant, was strolling leisurely on the lush grass, staff in hand, humming an ancient melody. Suddenly, Whis froze. An invisible shockwave, sharp as a knife, swept through his mind. His calm purple eyes widened to their limit. The hand of the angel, usually so steady, trembled for a beat. The staff slipped from Whis' hand, hitting the ground and striking a rock with a dry clack that broke the silence. This had never happened in his millions of years of service. Whis bent down to pick up the staff, beads of cold sweat on his forehead, muttering, "What is this spine-chilling sensation?" At that moment, from atop the giant ancient tree, A growl erupted. Beerus, the god of destruction who was napping, sprang up like a coiled spring. He gasped, the fur all over his body standing on end like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Beerus's glowing golden eyes darted around, searching for an invisible enemy in the void. Whis, Beerus shouted, his voice cracking with a vague but tangible fear. Did you feel that? Something just clawed at my spine. Something very disgusting, yes. Beerus-sama, Whis replied, his gaze serious as he looked into the crystal orb on his staff. But inside was only a screen of static interference. It is not battle key. It resembles a negation, a frequency attempting to rewrite the laws of nature. And it is emanating from the direction of Universe 7. Beerus narrowed his eyes, his claws shredding the bark of the ancient tree. Universe 7. That troublesome bunch again. But this time, I have a very bad feeling. This is no joke. Meanwhile, back on Earth, at the Grand Canyon, Arizona, majestic red cliffs rose toward the blue sky, creating a magnificent scene. Goku and Vegeta were floating amidst the abyss, the noon sun creating stark contrasts of light and shadow on the Saiyan warriors' toned bodies. They were in a sparring session, using only their base forms to hone pure technique, eschewing Super Saiyan auras. Yet, every clash of their hands, every kick, created sonic booms that tore through the air, causing rocks to tumble into the canyon below. Goku threw an uppercut. Vegeta tilted his head to dodge by a hair's breadth and countered with a roundhouse kick to the ribs. The two separated, floating opposite each other, breathing steadily. But Vegeta suddenly frowned. He didn't rush in to attack again. Instead, he lowered his hands, his dark eyes scanning the surroundings with heightened alert. Stop it, Kakarot, Vegeta said abruptly, his voice dropping low. What's wrong? Vegeta, we were just warming up, Goku asked blankly, scratching his head, still oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. Don't you feel the air getting heavy? Vegeta growled, sweat beginning to bead on his temples. Though he wasn't tired. It's not gravity pressure. It feels like the sky is lowering itself onto my lungs. Someone is watching us. Goku blinked, taking a deep breath. I feel normal though. Maybe you didn't eat enough for breakfast. Just as he finished speaking, Goku moved to pat Vegeta on the shoulder to resume the match. But suddenly, Goku's body reacted automatically. His pupils contracted, turning silver for a split second. His entire body flipped backward, performing a zero-gravity somersault in midair to dodge. Nothing. A perfect evasion against a non-existent attack. What? Goku landed, looking down at his trembling hands in shock. He hadn't commanded his body to do that. Vegeta stared wide-eyed at Goku, stunned. Just now. Was that Ultra Instinct? I don't know. Goku stared into the empty space before him, where there should have been nothing. My body. It defended itself automatically. It felt something staring right at us. A massive killing intent. But with no physical presence, the wind in the canyon suddenly stopped blowing. A deathly silence enveloped the two strongest warriors in the universe. They felt a chill run down their spines, as if a colossal predator was lurking right behind their necks. Meanwhile, in Universe 11, hailed as the universe of absolute justice, on a desolate planet where only dry gravel and eternal dust storms howled, Jiren, the strongest warrior of the Pride Troopers, was meditating atop a jagged mountain peak. He sat motionless like a statue carved from cold steel, a glowing red aura surrounding him like a protective cocoon, isolating him from the mundane world. Jiren's mind floated in the void, seeking absolute tranquility to fortify his power. But then, the signal hit. The inverse wave from Bulma's Omega experiment pierced through the multiverse barriers, transmitting into Jiren's mind like a sledgehammer striking a still lake. To Jiren, who worshipped order and absolute strength, this signal was not an admirable scientific achievement. It was chaos. It was noise, staining the sacred balance of the universe. Jiren's pitch-black eyes, deep as cosmic black holes, slowly opened. A terrifying pressure exploded from his body, blowing every rocky mountain within a 100-mile radius into flat land. As the dust settled, only his overwhelming presence remained. Jiren. A commanding voice rang out. Toppo, the candidate for God of Destruction and leader of the Pride Troopers, stepped out of a warp gate. He stroked his massive mustache, his face set in grim seriousness. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Jiren stood up. His shadow stretched long across the cracked earth. He didn't turn his head, but his cold voice seemed to freeze the surrounding air. "It comes from Universe 7. A distortion of reality, correct?" Toppo nodded in confirmation. Dispo reports that the spatial barrier between the two universes is cracking due to that strange frequency. If left unchecked, it could cause a butterfly effect that collapses the multiverse. Jiren clenched his fist. Red and black lightning shot from between his fingers, tearing the space around him. Son Goku, the name left Jiren's mouth filled with suppressed rage. "You again? Your existence, your foolish curiosity, is a mistake of creation." Jiren turned around. This time, his eyes held none of the mercy or respect from the Tournament of Power years ago. It was the gaze of an executioner preparing to carry out a sentence. Justice cannot tolerate the seeds of destruction. I will not wait for the gods to judge. I will correct this mistake myself. Behind Jiren, not a single spaceship, but an entire fleet of Pride Troopers was assembling, ready for a holy war. Jiren raised his hand, tearing open the space in front of him with pure power, creating a direct path to the signal source. Back at Area 51, Nevada, Bulma's initial joy had vanished completely, replaced by sheer panic. The computer screens in the lab began flashing wildly. Numbers jumped erratically without logic. Sirens wailed, mingling with the increasingly loud, beast-like growl of the Omega reactor. "Dad, what's happening? Why is the energy spiking?" Bulma screamed, her trembling fingers trying to type emergency shut-off commands. But the keyboard was locked tight. "I don't know. An external energy source is resonating with it, Doctor," Brief shouted back, clutching the black cat that was hissing with fur standing on end in terror. Suddenly, the entire power system went out. Only the crimson glow of the emergency rotating lights remained, creating a ghostly atmosphere. On the main screen, a text appeared, flashing bright red, hitting Bulma's eyes like a death sentence. "Warning, dimensional breach detected. Danger level, infinity." Simultaneously, outside in the Nevada desert, the world began to change. The clear noon sky suddenly shifted color. No dark clouds, no storm, but the soothing blue was replaced by a crimson red like fresh blood. The sunlight became harsh and toxic, dyeing everything in red. Clouds in the sky began to swirl, not by wind, but by a massive invisible suction force. They twisted into the shape of a giant eye opening wide, staring down at Area 51 with cold judgment. At the Grand Canyon, Vegeta stared up at that blood-red sky, his body frozen stiff as stone. The warrior instinct of the Saiyan Prince was screaming in his head, "Run!" But his legs felt nailed to the ground, unable to move. Goku stood beside him, sweat soaking the back of his shirt. He sensed a familiar ki, but this time it was thousands of times larger, colder, and crueler than their last encounter. It did not bear the color of competition, but the color of annihilation. Vegeta stammered, his usually proud voice cracking with horror. "This ki, this pressure, impossible. Is it him?" Goku swallowed hard, his eyes glued to the center of the cloud eye in the sky, where a small black spot began to appear and grow, tearing through Earth's atmosphere. Jiren. Goku whispered the name of his old enemy. But this time, he knew that a true catastrophe had just begun. The blood-red sky signaled a bloody era about to descend upon the planet. The The autumn sky over Washington, D.C. was a deep, boundless azure. White clouds drifted lazily past the tip of the Washington Monument like thin gossamer veils draped across the heavens. Down below, the hustle and bustle of the world's most powerful capital continued its rhythmic pulse. Tourists snapped photos by the White House fence. Politicians hurried with briefcases in hand, and children played tag on the National Mall. None of them knew that this artificial peace was being counted down by the dying heartbeats of a ticking doomsday clock. Suddenly, the sky was torn open. There was no explosion, no radar warning, only a violent, sudden shift in atmospheric pressure that caused the chests of millions to tighten in unison. A colossal black shadow, dense and cold, slowly swallowed the sunlight. The temperature plummeted. The wind died. Birds stopped singing and fell from the sky like inanimate stones. The entire city plunged into a deathly silence, the kind of quiet that heralds a storm of annihilation. From the highest layer of clouds, piercing through the ionosphere, the warship of the Pride Troopers, the Guardians of Justice, slowly revealed itself. This was not the grotesque, organic invasion craft of Frieza's army, nor was it the chaotic magic of Boo. It was a monolith of architectural perfection, razor-sharp and clad in the signature red and black of Universe 11. It radiated a cold, majestic light that was suffocating in its intensity. The ship hovered directly above the White House, so immense that its shadow engulfed the entire district, turning day into night. This was not a diplomatic visit. It was the imposition of gods upon mortals. Air raid sirens screamed, shredding the silence like the wail of a wounded beast. The United States' most advanced defense systems engaged immediately. From Andrews Air Force Base, the ground shook as afterburners ignited. 2 squadrons of F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs roared into the sky, tearing through the air. The pride of human military might, carrying the weight of Earth's defense, charged toward the alien object at supersonic speeds. Target locked. Requesting confirmation to engage. The squadron leader's voice crackled with tension over the comms, cold sweat tracing his spine despite the cockpit's climate control. He watched the Leviathan ship fill his HUD, a primal fear seizing his mind. But before his finger could even graze the missile release button, a streak of pale purple light flashed across the sky. It was too fast for the naked eye, faster than thought, and thousands of times faster than the speed of sound. It was Dispo. The sonic warrior of Universe 11 didn't move in a linear path. To the human eye, he existed everywhere at once. Inside the cockpit of the lead F-22, the pilot saw nothing but a blur of long rabbit ears wiping across his canopy, accompanied by a fleeting, arrogant smirk. The sound of metal tearing rang out dryly across the heavens, drowning out the jet engines. In a fraction of a second, a span of time shorter than a blink, the weapon systems of all 12 fighter jets were neutralized. Wings were bent at a precise 45-degree angle to kill aerodynamic lift without igniting the fuel tanks. The 20mm Vulcan cannons were twisted like soft, melted candy. Radars went dead. Electronics fried. Dispo hovered in midair, arms crossed, his sharp eyes watching the most advanced machines of humanity spiraling down, forced to deploy parachutes or attempt emergency water landings in the Potomac River. He didn't kill a single soul. To the Pride Troopers, slaughtering the weak who had no means to resist was an insult to justice. He simply stripped the beast known as Earth's military of its fangs with a mere wave of his hand. It was a silent, crushing declaration. Your toys of violence are useless against true justice. A hatch on the underbelly of the colossal warship slowly opened, accompanied by a low mechanical hum that vibrated through the skyscrapers miles away. A beam of solid red light descended onto the south lawn of the White House, forming a path of pure energy. 3 figures slowly descended down the light, like deities stepping down from Mount Olympus to judge humanity. Leading them, with large, black eyes void of emotion and muscles rippling under a tight red and black uniform, was Jiren the Grey. To his right was Topo, bearing his massive mustache and the burning aura of a candidate for god of destruction, his large hands clenched in authority. To his left was Dispo, the one who had just turned the US Air Force into a joke, his face cold but his eyes sharply scanning the perimeter. Jiren did not fly. He walked on the air as if descending invisible stairs. Every step he took caused the space around him to vibrate, sending ripples of pressure onto the shoulders of anyone standing within a 10-mile radius. He landed on the green grass. Miraculously, not a single blade was scorched, not a speck of dust rose. It was absolute energy control, perfect to the point of terror. Jiren stood there, immovable as a mountain, radiating a pressure that made the air feel thick and unbreathable. Inside the Oval Office, the president and his generals, though shielded by Secret Service agents armed with nuclear footballs and heavy weaponry, trembled as they watched through the bulletproof glass. They understood instantly that the guns in their agents' hands were nothing more than dry twigs against the inferno standing outside. Helplessness engulfed the most powerful men in the world. The moment Jiren's boots touched the earth, a familiar burst of energy exploded from the horizon, tearing through the dominance Jiren had established. Instant transmission, Goku appeared directly opposite Jiren, less than 10 meters away. Beside him, Vegeta materialized with a scowl, his dark eyes flashing with high alert. Gohan, Piccolo, and Android 17 landed immediately after, forming a defensive wedge. The shockwave from their sudden arrival blew the tails of Goku's orange gi and Piccolo's white cape violently. The air seemed to freeze. Time seemed to stand still. Two terrifying forces, one side the protectors of Earth who had challenged gods, the other the strongest enforcers of justice in the multiverse who had never known defeat, clashed invisibly. Static electricity crackled in the empty space between Goku and Jiren, though they had not yet touched. Goku looked straight into Jiren's eyes. The last time they met in the Tournament of Power, they were rivals, warriors who respected each other's strength. But this time, Jiren's gaze was different. It held no respect for a martial artist. It was cold, detached, hollow, and carried the weight of an executioner. He looked at Goku, not as an opponent, but as an obstacle that needed to be removed. Jiren Goku began, his voice low, trying to suppress the tension rising in his chest. He could feel that Jiren's ki was even deeper and more unfathomable than before. It didn't explode outward, it was silent like the bottom of the ocean, containing enough power to crush the world. Why are you attacking Earth? We aren't enemies. The Tournament of Power is over. Jiren didn't move a muscle. He stood there, arms crossed, his signature stance of invincibility. The wind whipped the Z fighters close, but it couldn't disturb a single fiber of Jiren's uniform. His voice rang out, not loud, but deep and resonant, echoing directly into the minds of everyone present like a tolling funeral bell. Hand over the Omega reactor and its creator. Goku furrowed his brow, confusion evident on his face. Omega reactor, he repeated, turning to look at Vegeta and Gohan. Both shook their heads. Vegeta gritted his teeth, his eyes darting subconsciously toward Capsule Corp for a split second before snapping back to Jiren. If Bulma had built something dangerous, she would have said so, or would she? I don't know what you're talking about, Goku replied, stepping forward and raising his hands in a gesture of peace, trying to use his sincerity to defuse the situation. But Jiren, look, we can talk this out. You stand for justice. You're a symbol of hope in Universe 11. You'd never hurt innocent people. Look around you. The people are terrified. You're scaring them. Jiren's eyes narrowed slightly. An aura of scorching, dense red ki began to leak from his body. It didn't flare up like fire. It spilled out like magma, causing the stone pavement beneath his feet to crack into spiderwebs. The heat distorted the air, twisting the visual space around him. The existence of that device is a crime against the balance of the multiverse, Jiren stated, every word falling like a boulder. His voice held no anger, only a ruthless determination. The energy it generates violates the taboo laws of the angels. I did not come here to negotiate. Son Goku, your naive faith once saved the universe, but this time, it is shielding the seeds of destruction. Hand it over, or Earth will be purged, Vegeta roared. Unable to contain himself, he stepped up beside Goku, his hair spiking up, a teal-blue aura beginning to envelop him, emitting a high-pitched hiss. You dare use that arrogant word to threaten the destruction of this planet right in front of the Prince of Science. Don't think beating me once gives you the right to issue orders here. This is my home. This is where my family lives. Toppo, standing beside Jiren, stroked his massive mustache. His booming voice filled with authority. Vegeta, your stubbornness is meaningless. Justice plays no favorites. If you choose to protect the threat over the universe, you too will be deemed criminals. Give me a break, Android 17 scoffed. Adjusting his gloves, you barge into someone's house, break their stuff, and call the homeowner a criminal. Justice has some weird logic. Goku clenched his fists. He could feel Jiren's ironclad resolve. There was no room for compromise. Jiren believed he was doing the right thing, and that was what made him terrifying. A villain doing evil for ambition can be shaken, But a hero doing evil in the name of justice cannot be stopped, Jiren. You're going too far, Goku shouted, his gaze shifting from pleading to resolute. The aura around him began to churn violently. I really don't know what this Omega thing is, and I promise we'll look into it. But if you try to touch Earth or my friends, I won't forgive you. No matter who you are, Jiren looked at Goku. It was a look filled with profound disappointment. He had once seen potential in Goku, a different path to strength through trust. But now, in Jiren's eyes, Goku was just a blind fool, protecting a calamity. The time for talk is over, son Goku. The moment the words left his lips, the atmosphere exploded. Without needing a command, Toppo and Dispo moved like perfectly programmed combat machines. Toppo bellowed, his muscles bulging and tearing the top of his uniform. His 10 fingers fired a barrage of red energy blasts like a meteor shower straight at Goku's group. These beams were not just fast, they carried destructive power, plowing through the earth and carving deep trenches into the White House lawn. Watch out, Piccolo yelled, throwing his heavy-weighted cape forward while flaring his ki to create a massive energy shield to protect Gohan and 17. The explosions shook the heavens and the earth. Dust and smoke billowed, covering the area. But right inside that cloud, a purple lightning bolt flashed. Your speed is too slow. Dispo vanished from his position, leaving a fading afterimage. He appeared right at Gohan's left flank, a fist wrapped in energy aiming straight for the Science Temple. Gohan, Piccolo shouted. But Gohan was no amateur. His eyes flashed, his mystic state activating instantly. He tilted his head, dodging the blow by a hair's breadth, and launched a counter kick. However, his leg hit nothing but air. Dispo had already vanished and reappeared behind Android 17. Meanwhile, at the epicenter of the blast, Goku and Vegeta instantly flared into Super Saiyan Blue. The brilliant azure light pierced the smoke. Both of them charged at Jiren simultaneously. Goku threw a thunderous punch at Jiren's face. Vegeta launched a hook kick at his ribs. The two attacks were perfectly coordinated, containing enough power to shatter a small planet. But Jiren remained rooted to the spot. He hadn't moved his feet. With just his arms still crossed over his chest, he had swatted Goku's punch away and blocked Vegeta's kick with his elbow as effortlessly as swatting a fly. An invisible wall, a wall of absolute strength, stood between them. The pressure from the impact caused the ground beneath them to collapse into a massive crater. Yet Jiren hovered in the center, untouched. He opened his wide eyes, staring directly at Goku and Vegeta, who were gritting their teeth, pushing with all their might. His eyes flashed red. "Is this all you have?" Jiren said coldly. From his eyes, an invisible impulse fired. Goku and Vegeta were blown backward like ragdolls, smashing into the distant fountain, shattering the white marble blocks. Water sprayed into the air, mixing with the dust. Jiren lowered his arms. For the first time since landing, he uncrossed them. The gesture was not one of relaxation, but a sign that he was beginning to get serious. He took one step forward. The entire space seemed to tilt toward him. "I will retrieve it myself," Jiren declared, his steps directed toward the city, where he sensed the mysterious energy source. "And anyone who stands in my way will be erased." Judgment Day had truly begun. This was no longer a martial arts contest. It was a war for survival against a force named Absolute Justice, and for the first time, Goku felt a trembling not from excitement, but from a vague fear of an unstoppable disaster. Wow, talk about hanging by a thread. The Z fighters are really up against the wall. Toppo and Dispo are already overwhelming them, yet the final boss, Jiren, just stands there arms crossed, eyes closed. That silence of his, it's honestly more terrifying than any explosion. Will Goku manage to awaken Ultra Instinct in time to break this deadlock? Or will Vegeta's rage over Bulma push him to a new level of power to protect his wife? And what is the true secret behind the Omega reactor that could drive Jiren, the very embodiment of justice, to be so ruthless? What do you guys think will happen when Jiren finally opens his eyes? Don't miss the explosive battles coming up in Part 3. The capital of Earth's greatest superpower now resembled a colossal graveyard of concrete and steel. The iconic white dome of the United States Capitol had been torn in half, exposing a charred iron framework that looked like the ribcage of a leviathan. Red dust and thick black smoke spiraled around the Washington Monument, turning the soaring white obelisk into a grim, dark tombstone against the twilight sky. The chaotic sounds of air raid sirens had long since ceased, replaced by the ear-splitting sonic booms of divine combat. The civilians were gone, evacuated or hiding deep underground, leaving the surface to the gods of destruction. In the center of the National Mall, where lush green grass once stretched from the Capitol to the White House, a massive crater now scarred the earth. Standing in the epicenter of this devastation was Jiren. He hovered silently over the murky waters of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. The water, usually a mirror of peace, was now boiling, bubbling from the sheer heat of his latent ki. Jiren looked down at two figures struggling to rise from the rubble of the Lincoln Memorial. The statue of President Lincoln behind them was shattered, leaving only half a stone face staring blankly at the catastrophe. Goku and Vegeta gasped for air. Their breathing was ragged, mixing with the metallic scent of blood. "Is this the power that protects Earth?" Jiren's voice boomed, echoing off the ruined federal buildings with crushing pressure. "You let this city fall, all to buy yourselves a few minutes of agonizing defeat." Vegeta stumbled to his feet, clutching his broken left arm. Blood streamed from his forehead, obscuring one eye. He looked around. The sea was obliterated, human pride trampled under the boots of an outsider. But what twisted his gut wasn't the destruction. He glanced to his side. Kakarot, that idiot, was kneeling on one knee, propping himself up on shards of marble. Despite his injuries, despite his ki running dry, a stubborn, unyielding fire still burned in Goku's black eyes. He never knew when to quit. "Why?" a voice screamed inside Vegeta's head. "Why? Even when we are both pathetic? Do you still look like a man who sees a path to victory? While I only see my own powerlessness, jealousy, a dark, viscous emotion Vegeta thought he had buried long ago, surged violently amidst the ashes of the American capital. It wasn't hot like fire. It was cold, sharp, and it stabbed straight into the Saiyan Prince's pride. "Where are you looking?" Jiren, Vegeta growled, stepping in front of Goku. "Your opponent is me." Jiren glanced at Vegeta, his gaze like a giant looking at an ant trying to bite his heel. "You have reached your limit, Vegeta." "Lie down, limit. Don't make me laugh." Vegeta threw his head back and let out a soul-tearing roar. The entire district shook. The water in the reflecting pool detonated, shooting hundreds of meters into the air. Debris from the Lincoln Memorial began to float, then disintegrated into fine dust under the crushing pressure of Vegeta's rising energy. "Kakarot has ultra instinct. He follows the path of angels. But I am the prince of all Saiyans. I will forge my own path." A pillar of dark indigo light erupted, swallowing Vegeta. It wasn't the bright cyan of standard Super Saiyan blue. It was dense, heavy, the color of the abyss. Purple streaks of lightning Hakai, destruction, energy crackled across his body, tearing black rifts in the space around him. When the light settled, Vegeta was revealed. His muscles had bulged, veins popping like tree roots of steel. His spiky blue hair had darkened to a deep royal blue, almost black. But most terrifying were his eyes. The pupils were gone, leaving only irises of manic, glowing emerald. Super Saiyan blue. Royal Berserk. "I will show you the difference between a genius and trash." Vegeta vanished. The ground beneath him exploded, leaving a crater on the steps of the memorial. In a nanosecond, he reappeared directly in front of Jiren. Vegeta's fist, wrapped in destruction energy, slammed into Jiren's face. The punch was so powerful that the air compressed and detonated, creating a shockwave that flattened the cherry blossom trees along the tidal basin a kilometer away. Jiren was pushed back. For the first time, his boots skidded across the water. Vegeta attacked with feral madness. He abandoned defense. Every punch, every kick was a sacrificial move, trading blood for damage. He grabbed Jiren, hurling him violently into the Washington Monument. The iconic obelisk snapped in half, collapsing in a cloud of dust that choked the sky. Vegeta flew high above, cupping his hands. A massive sphere of dark purple energy formed, swirling like a miniature dying sun, illuminating the ruined city. Final flash. Extinction. The beam fired downward, swallowing Jiren and the entire National Mall in a sea of violet fire. Vegeta panted, his chest heaving as if it might burst. He looked down, his eyes wide with mania and exhaustion. "I did it, Kakarot. Do you see? I am stronger." The smirk on Vegeta's face vanished. From within the smoke and chaotic energy, a hand reached out, waving the blast away as if swatting a fly. Jiren stepped out. His Pride Trooper uniform was shredded, revealing a gray torso without a single scratch. "Is that all?" Jiren asked, his voice ice cold, power born from jealousy is impure. Jiren vanished. He reappeared directly behind Vegeta, hovering in the deep sea. Sky, you are too loud. A simple double-axe handle strike slammed into the center of Vegeta's back. The sound of his spine cracking was dry and sickening. Vegeta coughed up fresh blood, his eyes bulging. His body fell from the sky like a meteor, crashing into the south lawn of the White House, creating a deep, dark crater. Vegeta lay there, motionless. The royal berserk aura vanished. In his delirium, he could still see Goku's silhouette. The jealousy turned into bitter humiliation. I lost again. I lost before he even made his move. Goku witnessed it all. He stood up, his legs trembling on the broken stone steps. Jiren, Goku whispered. He closed his eyes. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to scream and turn Super Saiyan to avenge Vegeta. But he knew anger was useless now. Ultra Instinct, sign, required tranquility, but his energy was drained. His body was empty. But in that emptiness, Goku felt something else. Even though Washington, D.C. was devastated, even though concrete and steel crushed the earth, life remained. He heard the Potomac River murmuring as it flowed, washing away the debris of war. He heard the roots of the thousands of cherry trees around the tidal basin, groaning under the heat but refusing to let go of the soil. He felt the breath of the Atlantic Ocean carried on the wind. The Genki Dama principle, not borrowing, but becoming one. Don't try to control the flow, Goku muttered Whis' teachings. Become the flow. Goku opened his chest. He didn't power up. He relaxed. He let go. From the cracks in the charred asphalt, tiny specks of green light began to rise. It was the life force of the grass, the soil, the river. They didn't gather into a ball. They permeated Goku's very cells. Jiren, descending from the sky to finish Vegeta, paused. He felt the ground tremble. Not a violent shake, but a rhythmic thrumming, like a heartbeat. A pillar of emerald green light erupted from Goku's position, pushing back the smoke of war. The green light spread outward. Miraculously, atop the gray ruins, fresh grass began to sprout at an impossible speed. The broken cherry blossom stumps suddenly shot up, blooming with vibrant, unseasonal pink flowers. The zone of death was instantly transformed into a radiant primeval forest. From within the pillar of light, Goku stepped out. His spiky black hair was coated in an emerald aura that shimmered like fairy dust. His eyes had turned a deep turquoise, calm and still like an ancient lake. Vines of pure energy wove across his body, stitching his wounds shut. Ultra Instinct, Gaia breath of earth. This power. Jiren frowned. It isn't sharp. It is soft. Goku didn't answer. He stepped onto the air. Where his foot landed, a lotus of light bloomed. Jiren charged, throwing a punch capable of shattering a planet. Goku didn't block. He swayed. His movement was as soft as a leaf in the wind, riding the air current created by Jiren's fist. Goku appeared at Jiren's side. He placed a palm gently on Jiren's chest. Gong! A bell-like sound resonated from within Jiren's chest. A massive impulse shockwave exploded, ignoring his outer durability and rattling his internal organs. Erg! Jiren spat saliva. Goku waved his hands. Green streams of ki rose from the ground, transforming into thousands of massive energy vines, wrapping tight around Jiren's limbs. You think these roots can hold me? Jiren roared, flexing to break free. But strangely, the vines didn't snap. They were elastic, bending with Jiren's force, absorbing his kinetic energy to grow stronger. Your power is destruction, Goku spoke, his voice no longer the battle-hungry Saiyan, but deep and authoritative, like a guardian of the forest. This is life. The more you destroy, the more life fights to fill the void. Goku delivered a roundhouse kick. Vines from his leg morphed into a massive spectral tree trunk, whipping Jiren straight into the ruins of the White House. The symbol of power collapsed completely, burying the warrior of justice under tons of rubble. Vegeta cracked an eye open. Green grass was growing towards him, healing his minor cuts. Kakarot, have you evolved again? What is it this time? Are you the god of these damn weeds now? The jealousy remained, but now it was mixed with fear. Fear of Goku's infinite potential. A terrifying silence fell over the White House ruins. The pile of rubble began to vibrate. Then it was blasted away. Jiren stood there, but he had changed. The familiar red aura was gone. In its place, the temperature in Washington, D.C. plummeted. Moisture in the air froze instantly, falling as diamond dust. The rushing Potomac River stopped dead, turning into a massive glacier in the blink of an eye. The blooming cherry blossoms froze solid, their petals shattering like glass. Jiren stepped forward. His aura was a blinding white cold. Dead. Absolute. A thin layer of ice coated his body like crystal armor. Jiren, Form 1. Absolute zero life. Jiren scoffed, a twisted smile of contempt forming Life is a mistake of the universe. It is chaotic, weak, and dependent. But the cold is order. It is eternal. He raised one finger. I only need to remove the heat. All life ends, including this borrowed instinct of yours. Goku felt a bone-chilling cold pierce his Gaia aura. He frowned and lunged. The energy vines lashed out at Jiren, but the moment they touched Jiren's white aura, the vines froze, turned gray, and shattered into dust. Impossible, Goku gasped. All atomic movement ceases before me. Jiren vanished. No, he didn't move fast. He seemed to erase the distance by freezing the space-time between them. He appeared in front of Goku before Goku could even blink. Sleep. Warrior of Earth. Jiren lashed out with a kick. His right leg was encased in a jagged axe of ice, radiating at temperature millions of degrees below zero. Frozen impact. Goku raised both arms to block, trusting his instinct. It was futile. The moment Jiren's shin touched Goku's forearms, the cold transferred faster than neural signals. Goku's arms froze. Goku's chest froze. The emerald aura flickered, then extinguished like a candle doused in liquid nitrogen. Goku was kicked backward, flying across the National Mall and slamming into the base of the broken Washington Monument. He didn't fall. He stuck there, because his entire body was now sealed inside a block of permafrost a meter thick. Goku, Gaia, the hope of life, was now a beautiful, tragic ice sculpture, his eyes wide in shock, forever staring at the gray sky of the capital. Vegeta lay paralyzed. The cold reached him, making him shiver violently. Kakarot was completely defeated, turned into a decoration in that monster's collection. Jiren touched down. He didn't even look at Goku. He walked across the frozen surface of the reflecting pool, heading toward the underground bunker beneath the White House wreckage, where the strongest energy signal was pulsing. He waved his hand, slicing through 10 meters of earth and reinforced concrete, revealing a secret chamber. On a pedestal of titanium alloy, the Omega Energy Core hovered. It pulsed with a chaotic red and black light, malevolent and wild, in stark contrast to the silent ice outside. Jiren stepped forward and ripped the core from its mount. Dark electricity arced up his arm, but he crushed it, subduing it with his absolute power. He walked out of the bunker, standing atop the highest pile of rubble in DC, holding the Omega Core aloft. Behind him was the frozen statue of Goku and the broken body of Vegeta. Around him was a magnificent capital turned into icy ruins. Justice does not require life to bloom, Jiren declared, his voice broadcasting across the planet. Justice is an eternal glacier, cold, unmoving. He looked at the red-black gem in his hand, ambition flaring in his eyes. And with this, I will freeze the order of the multiverse. The screen fades to black, leaving only the sound of the wind howling through the dead skyscrapers of Washington. Goku is frozen solid. Vegeta is down. Washington drowns in the hopeless cold of absolute zero. Is this the final curtain for mankind? Hold on. Don't take your eyes off the screen. The true nightmare begins now as Jiren is about to devour the Omega Core and become a demon god. Now that the main heavy hitters are down, who will take the lead? Gotenks with his lightning power? Or the crazy combination of Gohan's mind and Broly's brute force? Episode 4 will be an explosive, must-watch battle where the side characters finally step up to save the day. Do they have the strength to break the eternal ice? Let's wait and see. The cold, an absolute, deathly cold, enveloped the ruins of the capital, Washington, D.C. Wind screamed through the fissures of collapsed skyscrapers, creating ghostly sounds akin to the wailing of lost souls. The eternal ice statue, imprisoning Son Goku, still stood towering in the middle of the National Mall, his eyes wide open, staring blankly at the gray sky. Not far away, at the bottom of a deep abyss created by the explosion, Vegeta lay motionless, his weak breath exhaling fragile wisps of white smoke, his life hanging by a thread like a candle in the wind. Jiren stood atop the highest pile of wreckage, what was once the dome of the Capitol building. In his hand, the Omega Energy Core writhed. Unlike the flawless beauty of the Dragon Balls or the purity of Divine Ki, this core radiated chaos. It vibrated violently, emitting a flickering red and black light, with tiny sparks of dark lightning shooting out, corroding the very air. This was the glitch, an incomplete energy source containing the fury of the primitive universe before order was established. Power. Jiren whispered, his voice hoarse, devoid of his usual calm. His eyes stared intently at the core, reflecting a mad ambition. If my justice is not enough to impose order, then I will become chaos itself to rule it. He was no longer the warrior of Universe 11. He was a desperate desperate man seeking absolute power. Jiren raised his rough hand and crushed the core. The outer energy shell shattered. An ear-piercing shriek rang out, like the scream of 10,000 imprisoned souls. A stream of energy, black as tar, surged out, flowing along Jiren's arm. Without hesitation, Jiren opened his mouth wide and swallowed the bleeding energy core whole. A second of absolute silence. A dull explosion resonated from deep within Jiren's body, as if a star had just collapsed inside his stomach. Jiren's eyes rolled back, his hands clutching his throat as he collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Jiren's scream tore through the night, shaking the very atmosphere. It was not the scream of a human, but the roar of a beast shedding its skin in excruciating pain. His invulnerable ash-gray body began to crack. Fissures ran down his spine, spread to his chest, and up to his face, but no blood flowed from those cracks. Brilliant orange-red light erupted like volcanic magma. His flesh swelled and twisted, muscles bulging and deforming, ripping his Pride Trooper uniform into shreds. The surrounding temperature skyrocketed unnaturally. The layer of eternal ice he had created in the previous episode began to melt, evaporating into thick columns of mist that enveloped Jiren. From his back, 6 fleshy tumors bulged up, beating rhythmically like monstrous hearts. Black blood splattered. 6 gigantic energy wings tore through the flesh and burst forth. They were not soft like bird wings, but razor-sharp like blades, burning with red-black fire and edged with dark lightning. Jiren stood up. He had grown twice his normal size. His deep black eyes, once full of philosophy, were gone. In their place were 2 pits of burning fire with no pupils, only pure destruction. Final form, Omega Chaos Jiren, god of chaotic destruction. But this power was too great, too raw. It was trying to tear its host apart. Jiren growled, trying to maintain the last shred of his sanity. He sat cross-legged in midair. The 6 energy wings closed in, wrapping around his body to form a spherical cocoon of destruction, radiating heat that melted the reinforced concrete below. He needed time to digest and synchronize with the monster inside him. The moment the cocoon formed, the sky above Washington roared with the sound of engines. A fleet of saucer-shaped spaceships bearing the symbol of Universe 11 tore through the clouds and descended. The Pride Troopers had arrived. Leading them were Toppo and Dispo. Toppo, with his magnificent mustache and stern eyes, looked down at the desolate battlefield. He saw Jiren in the process of metamorphosis, and he understood his mission immediately. Jiren is ascending to a new realm. This is the decisive moment for justice, Toppo roared, his booming voice full of authority. Protect Jiren at all costs. Eliminate anyone who dares to approach Dispo. The Speed Warrior smirked, his long ears twitching. Those scions are already down. Only the small fry remain. He dove down, intending to deliver a finishing blow to the unconscious Vegeta. A stream of golden ki cut across Dispo's path, forcing him to brake hard in midair. 2 young men landed, shielding Vegeta, Goten and Trunks. Teen version, 17, 18 years old. Both had shed their childish looks, becoming more rugged and serious than ever before. Don't even think about touching my dad, Trunks said, his hand resting on the hilt of the sword on his back, a new blade forged by Capsule Corp. You think bullying the wounded is justice? Goten clenched his fists, his gaze determined, looking exactly like Goku. On the other side, another massive tremor appeared. Gohan, in his familiar purple Jai, and Broly landed. Broly looked calmer than before, wearing a key control device on his neck made by Bulma, but his eyes still held a terrifying, wild power. Split up. Gohan ordered quickly. Goten, Trunks, you handle the long ears. Broly and I will stop the bearded one. Don't let them near Dad and Vegeta. The battle of the supporting characters officially began. 2 little brats, Dispo sneered. I am the super speed warrior of the universe. You won't even see my fists. Dispo activated super maximum light speed mode. A purple aura flared around him, his body blurred. Goten and Trunks were knocked back before they could even blink. Dispo moved so fast he created thousands of afterimages, surrounding the 2 boys. Trunks, fusion, single forms can't keep up with him, Goten shouted, wiping blood from his lip. Right, let's show him the results of our 3 years of training. Both jumped back, synchronizing their ki perfectly. A blinding light exploded, pushing Dispo back. When the light faded, a warrior with 2-toned purple and black hair, wearing a Metamoran vest, appeared. Gotenks, teen version, smirked, cracking his neck arrogantly. Fusion, useless. Dispo charged. He was confident in his light speed, but Gotenks didn't turn Super Saiyan 1 or 3 as usual. He closed his eyes, focusing intensely. Hey long ears, you're as fast as light. Right, but light only travels in a straight line. Gotenks opened his eyes. His pupils disappeared, replaced by two glowing beams of blue electricity. As for me, I am a natural disaster. Gotenks' hair grew long like SSJ3, but it wasn't golden. It burned a platinum blonde, mixed with electric blue. The aura around him wasn't fire, but billions of lightning bolts weaving together, crackling deafeningly. New form, Super Saiyan 3, Lightning God. What the hell is that? Dispo stalled. Let's end this. Gotenks vanished. No, he didn't run. He teleported as a bolt of lightning. A sharp crack resonated. Gotenks appeared right above Dispo's head, faster than neural reflexes. Dispo couldn't finish his sentence. Thunderbolt kicked Gotenks' heel crashed down, accompanied by a blue lightning bolt striking directly into Dispo's neck. Dispo was slammed into the ground, plowing through the asphalt, but he sprang back up immediately, furious. Don't mess with me, E. Dispo accelerated to maximum. He ran around Gotenks, creating a purple tornado. The wind pressure sliced through surrounding buildings, but Gotenks stood still, arms crossed, his long hair flowing in the storm. Sensing the electric charge, Gotenks muttered there. He raised one finger to the sky. Dark clouds rolled in, completely covering the deep sea. Sky. Dispo, your speed relies on muscles. My speed is electromagnetic conduction. Gotenks swung his hand down. Galactic thunder dawned. Storm version. Hundreds of rings of lightning struck down from the heavens. They didn't bind Dispo physically but formed a massive Faraday cage, locking down his movement space. Every time Dispo touched a ring, millions of volts of electricity discharged straight into his nervous system, paralyzing his muscles. Dispo screamed, suspended in midair by the magnetic field. Gotenks charged, his entire body turning into a giant lightning arrow. Lightning Crusher. A lightning-clad uppercut smashed straight into Dispo's jaw. His jawbone fractured. An electromagnetic pulse surged through his body, shutting down all brain signals. Dispo's eyes rolled back, unconscious, and he fell to the ground like a broken bird one down. Gotenks dusted off his hands, triumphant. On the other side, the atmosphere was 1,000 times heavier. Toppo wasn't joking around. He had activated God of Destruction mode right from the start. His body was covered in a dark purple Hawkeye aura. Everything he touched vanished into nothingness. Your existence is a mistake. Toppo raised his hand, Justice Heikai. Dozens of spheres of destruction energy fired toward Gohan and Broly. Broly roared, intending to punch them. Stop, Broly, don't touch it, Gohan shouted. But it was too late. Broly's fist grazed a Hawkeye sphere. The skin on his hand was instantly erased, revealing white bone, but the legendary Saiyan's regeneration closed the wound immediately. However, the pain drove Broly further into madness. Broly's eyes went white. He began to lose control. Green Ki exploded chaotically, destroying friend and foe alike. Toppo smirked. Just a wild beast. He landed a punch wrapped in Hawkeye into Broly's gut, sending him flying through 3 buildings. Gohan charged, hair spiked white, eyes blood red in beast form. Makanko Sappo, special beam cannon. The spiral beam fired. Toppo swiped his hand lightly, erasing the beam completely. Useless. Gohan, your beast form is strong, but not enough to counter the concept of destruction of a god. Gohan stepped back, panting. He looked at Broly, who was crawling up, madness swallowing his reason. Gohan knew if Broly lost total control, Earth would be doomed before they could defeat Toppo. He needed a tactic, a combination. Gohan recalled his training with Piccolo. The ability of Beast is not just power, but evolution and adaptation. Gohan flew to the giant's side, placing a hand on his shoulder. Listen to me. Don't suppress the anger. Let it out. But let me guide it, Broly growled. But he felt the trust from Gohan. He nodded. Gohan closed his eyes. He didn't attack Toppo. He flared his beast ki to the limit, but instead of projecting it outward, he forced it to wrap around Broly's body. Broly's ki, green, and Gohan's ki, white-purple, merged. A terrifying sight appeared. Broly stood there, muscles rippling, but encasing his body was a gigantic energy armor shaped like a beast, similar to Susanoo or Kurama mode, formed from Gohan's beast ki. The armor took the shape of a great ape, but sleeker, with razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. Combo form. Armored Broly. Demonic armor Broly. What is that? Toppo looked confused for the first time. Gohan stood on the shoulder of the energy armor, acting as the brain. while Broly was the nuclear reactor providing infinite power. Go. Broly, crush him, Broly roared. The energy armor roared with him. Toppo fired a massive Hawkeye sphere, destruction sphere. Broly didn't dodge. He charged straight into the sphere. Gohan's beast armor acted as the skin to take the damage. When the Hawkeye made contact, the armor sizzled and corroded, but Broly's key regeneration speed was so fast the armor rebuilt itself instantly. Broly pierced through the destruction sphere like an arrow tearing through the wind. Impossible. Toppo retreated in panic. Broly appeared right in front of Toppo. Gohan shouted. Demon God combo. Broly struck. The energy armor mimicked the movement, unleashing punches the size of buildings. Each punch shook the earth's crust. Toppo tried to block, but Broly's sheer physical strength combined with the hardness of the beast ki overwhelmed the defenses of the trainee god of destruction. Finish him. Broly clasped his hands together. The energy armor also clasped its giant claws together. Omega Gigantic Smash. The smash rained down from the heavens onto Toppo's head. The compression force was so terrible the surrounding space shattered like glass. Toppo's Hawkeye aura was completely crushed. A pillar of blue-purple light shot straight into space. Toppo was hammered into the earth, creating a bottomless pit. He lay there, eyes white, reverted to his normal Pride Trooper form. Completely defeated, Gohan exhaled sharply, dispelling the armor. Broly also slumped down, returning to his base form, smiling innocently at Gohan. They had won. Gotenks flew over, high-fiving Gohan. Awesome. Big bro. We cleaned house. The battlefield fell silent. Both Dispo and Toppo had fallen. Hope had just been kindled, but a small, yet crystal clear sound echoed from the direction of Jiren's cocoon. The smile on Gotenks' lips vanished. Gohan whipped around, his pupils shrinking in fear. The red-black energy cocoon didn't shatter because it was attacked. It was hatching. A wave of horrific pressure swept across all of Washington, D.C., powerful enough to blow Gohan, Broly, and Gotenks kilometers away like ragdolls. Amidst the blinding dust and smoke, 6 gigantic energy wings unfurled, blotting out the moon, staining the night sky blood red. Magma trickled down Jiren's colossal body. He stepped out, each footstep melting the rocky ground. Omega Chaos Jiren was complete. He didn't look at Gohan's group. He looked toward the ice statue of Goku. He raised a single finger, pointing straight at the statue now. For the main course, a beam of searing red light gathered at his fingertip, containing enough power to obliterate the entire solar system. The capital, Washington, D.C., the heart of humanity's superpower, was now reduced to a mere geographical abstraction. The heat radiating from Omega Chaos Jiren had obliterated the boundary between solid and liquid matter. Skyscrapers of steel and glass, symbols of modern civilization, were writhing and melting like giant candles abandoned in a desert. The Potomac River, which once reflected the poetic moonlight, had evaporated completely, leaving behind a parched, cracked riverbed groaning under the weight of the superheated atmosphere. Hovering above this hell on Earth, Jiren appeared as a god of absolute destruction. The 6 energy wings on his back did not flap, yet every time they vibrated slightly, the surrounding space warped, creating ripples of heat that blurred the very starlight. He pointed a finger at the melting ice statue of Son Goku, a simple gesture that carried the weight of a death sentence. In his eyes, Goku's life was now measured in split seconds, but destiny always finds a way to slip through the narrowest cracks of despair. From deep within the ruins of the Lincoln Memorial, where marble slabs had crumbled into dust, a wounded green arm reached out. Piccolo, the proud Namekian warrior, was lying prone on the scorching ground. His body was battered after shielding Gohan's group from the terrible shockwaves during their retreat. Purple blood ran down his rugged face, his breathing heavy like the heaving of a blacksmith's bellows. Yet, his eyes still burned with an indomitable will. With the last remnants of his strength, Piccolo pulled 2 tiny beans from his tattered clothes. They were not just food, they were a miracle, Earth's final gamble. He couldn't scream, his throat was severely injured, but his mind roared the names of his 2 comrades. His arm swung, a throw containing all his faith and hope. 2 senzu beans cut through the wind, piercing the thick heat haze, flying straight toward the 2 Saiyans on the verge of death. One bean fell precisely into Goku's mouth just as the ice covering his face shattered from the heat. The other landed right in the twitching palm of Vegeta in the dark abyss. Time seemed to stand still in that moment. The sound of the beans crunching was small, yet it shook the spiritual realm. A violent surge of vitality exploded from within their bodies. Damaged cells were reconstructed at light speed. Shattered bones automatically snapped back together. and their depleted ki was refilled like an ocean receiving a torrential rain after a 1,000-year drought. From two opposite positions on the battlefield, two colossal pillars of golden and blue energy erupted, piercing the pitch-black sky, blasting molten concrete chunks kilometers away. Goku and Vegeta shot up into the sky, stopping at eye level with Jiren. They stood there, the two greatest warriors of Universe 7, surrounded by brilliant auras, but contrary to their physical recovery, their spirits were under unprecedented pressure. There were no confident smiles, no arrogant challenges. Cold sweat ran down Vegeta's temples, mixing with the grime of battle. Goku stared at Jiren. He, who always found joy in battle. He felt a primal fear creep into his heart for the first time. He realized that the thing standing before him was no longer a martial artist, nor a god. Jiren had become a cosmic phenomenon, a sentient natural disaster. His energy did not radiate outward, it compressed, creating a distinct gravitational field that crushed all laws of physics around it. Jiren looked at his two recovered opponents, his fiery face shifting slightly into an expression of mockery. He wasn't disappointed that his prey had escaped death. On the contrary, he seemed pleased. He wanted to crush them at their peak, to prove that their efforts were nothing but a drop in the ocean. Vegeta turned to look at Goku, his eyes filled with intense internal conflict. The pride of the Saiyan Prince screamed, forbidding him from performing the lowly act of fusing with his eternal rival. But the reason of a seasoned warrior, who had walked the line between life and death countless times, told him this was the only way. The power gap was no longer a distance. It was an unbridgeable abyss. Goku nodded, understanding his friend's torment. He said nothing, simply giving a thumbs up, a silent promise that this would be the last time. Both backed away, adjusting their breathing to synchronize their energy to absolute perfection. The space around them began to vibrate in resonance. They began to perform the fusion dance. The movements were fluid, precise to the millimeter. However, this battlefield was no longer a place for holy miracles. The atmosphere in Washington, D.C. was heavily polluted. It was thick with omega energy, dust red and black matter radiating from Jiren, containing the primitive chaos of the early universe. These particles floated, waiting, like hungry parasites. The moment the tips of Goku and Vegeta's index fingers touched, an incident unprecedented in Dragon Ball history occurred. Instead of creating a perfect resonance, the point of contact between the two fingers became a miniature black hole, sucking in the surrounding omega dust. That chaotic energy invaded the fusion process, bending the flow of pure ki, forcing the two souls to merge in a poisoned environment. Normally, a brilliant golden light would erupt, signaling the birth of the ultimate warrior, Gogeta. But no, a bizarre storm of deep violet mixed with platinum energy exploded, tearing through space, creating cracks in reality like a spider web. The thunder did not clap sharply. It sounded like the wailing of vengeful spirits from the void. From within that distorted and flickering pillar of light, a silhouette emerged. The new warrior hovered in the void, carrying an aura, both familiar and alien, full of mystery and instability. He was not Gogeta with golden or blue hair. His spiked hair was deep violet at the roots, fading into sparkling platinum at the tips, looking like a distant nebula in the vast universe. His eyes had no irises, only a piercing, glowing purple. This was a mutated variant, an accident of magic and chaos. Gogeta Cosmic Phantom. Jiren narrowed his eyes at the newly appeared creature. He felt a discomfort creeping into his mind. He couldn't read this guy's energy level. It flickered in and out, inconsistent like a dying lamp, yet containing the power of an entire galaxy. He flapped the energy wings on his back. 6 beams of molten heat fired simultaneously, melting the space in their path, rushing straight at Gogeta faster than light. An omnidirectional attack with no blind spots, enough to wipe out a planet. But Gogeta didn't dodge. He stood still, his purple eyes staring straight at the approaching death with chilling indifference. And then, the impact happened, but not in the usual way. The heat beams passed through Gogeta's body as if passing through a thin wisp of smoke, or a hologram. There was no explosion, no resistance. Gogeta's image merely shimmered slightly, then dissolved like television static, leaving astonishment clearly visible on Jiren's fiery face. Immediately after, a whisper rang out right next to Jiren's ear, the voice overlapping as if echoing from multiple different dimensions. Jiren spun around, throwing a magma-clad punch into the empty space behind him with the lightning reflexes of a veteran warrior. But his fist passed through Gogeta's chest again without meeting any resistance. This was not an afterimage created by speed. This was phasing. The phantom Gogeta's body oscillated continuously between reality and illusion, between existence and non-existence, making him indeterminate and untouchable. The moment Jiren's fist passed through his chest, Gogeta smiled, a smirk full of arrogance. His neon gloves glowed brightly. He shifted from an intangible state to a solid entity in a microsecond. A sweeping kick was unleashed. Gogeta's leg turned into a block of condensed matter, slamming hard into Jiren's temple. A terrifying shockwave spread across the sky. Jiren's head was knocked violently to the side, saliva mixed with black blood spraying from the corner of his mouth. For the first time since transforming, Jiren felt pain. Rage erupted in Jiren's heart. He felt humiliated by this game of hide and seek. He roared, unleashing the full power of Omega Chaos, releasing an energy storm covering a radius of hundreds of kilometers. The surrounding space became a sea of chaotic energy fire, burning all matter down to the atomic level. But Gogeta began to dance amidst that storm of destruction. He glided like a ghost, flickering in and out of sight. Whenever Jiren's attacks made contact, his body turned into an illusion to evade. Then, in the very next second, materialized to counterattack at fatal weak points. He left beautiful neon trails amidst the pitch-black sky, painting a picture of light on the canvas of death. Jiren, the possessor of overwhelming power, was being turned into a clumsy giant punching at the void. Gogeta retreated, hovering high above, observing Jiren frantically attacking the air. He knew he couldn't maintain this phantom state for long. The instability of the mutated fusion was eating away at his body. Every cell was screaming from overload. It was time to end this with a decisive blow. Gogeta brought his hands forward, energy beginning to gather, not the familiar blue, but a massive sphere of black-violet energy, with a blinding white core, surrounded by orbital rings rotating like a compressed miniature galaxy. Its power bent the light around it, sucking everything into the focal point. He shouted, firing the Big Bang Kamehameha Nebula toward Jiren. The colossal beam shot out, dragging space along with it, creating a vacuum tunnel aiming straight for the target. This power was enough to blow away half the universe, carrying the last hope of humanity to destroy the monster before him. Jiren stood there, watching the beam approaching at terrifying speed. But this time, he showed no confusion or anger. He stood upright, his chest heaving, his fiery eyes suddenly becoming frighteningly calm. The silence before the greatest storm. The Omega core in his chest suddenly flared up, then shifted from red to absolute black, darker than the night, like a black hole swallowing all light and hope. Jiren widened his eyes, activating the ultimate authority. The game-breaking power of the Omega core, nullification. An invisible pulse, colorless and soundless, exploded from his body, sweeping across the incoming Big Bang Kamehameha. What happened next defied all understanding of combat. No explosion occurred, no earth-shattering collision. The violet beam, carrying Gogeta's terrifying destructive power, simply vanished completely. It was deleted, formatted from reality as if it had never existed. The space became empty, returning a silence so eerie it sent chills down the spine. Gogeta froze, his purple eyes wide in horror, his arms still in the firing position. But before him was only nothingness. The strongest attack, the crystallization of the two greatest warriors, had been erased as easily as a cosmic joke. Jiren said nothing. He stepped onto the air, each step slow but firm, as if walking on the invisible stairs of destiny. He reached out a hand, and a horrific gravitational pull from his palm dragged Gogeta toward him. Gogeta tried to reactivate his intangible state to escape, but he was horrified to realize his body no longer obeyed commands. The pulse from Jiren's Omega core had locked all indeterminate states, altering the rules of reality, forcing Gogeta to return to a physical entity, stripping away all supernatural defenses. Jiren's giant hand, burning like magma, clamped tight around Gogeta's throat. The fused warrior struggled in despair, punching repeatedly at the enemy's arm. But Jiren was now harder than Cosmic Diamond. Every effort was meaningless, like an egg striking a rock. Jiren lifted Gogeta high, looking deep into the panicked purple eyes. His voice rang out, deep and full of contempt. You rely on tricks, on borrowing, and on visual deceptions. Did you think you could use illusions to blind the truth? Jiren's hand tightened. Gogeta's stylish neon armor shattered piece by piece, falling to the ground like broken glass. The sound of bones being crushed rang out, the only sound breaking the deadly silence. A counterfeit can never defeat the genuine article. I am absolute. Jiren channeled all his ki into his other hand, delivering a straight, mountain-crushing punch into Gogeta's gut. The punch carried not just physical strength, but disintegration energy. It pierced through the soul, shattering the fusion structure from within, severing the bond between the two spirits. Gogeta let out a heart-wrenching scream of pain, the violet platinum light around him shattering into fragments. A blinding energy explosion occurred, blowing everything away. When the light faded, Gogeta was gone. In his place, Goku and Vegeta were flung in two directions, free-falling onto the molten, ash-covered ground. Their bodies were battered, their wills broken. The strongest fusion, the greatest hope, and the final gamble had failed completely before Jiren's irrational power. Goku lay prone on the ground, trying to lift his head in excruciating pain, blood streaming down his face, blurring his vision. He looked up at the sky, where Omega Chaos Jiren floated with 6 energy wings blotting out the heavens, his dark shadow covering everything like a giant funeral shroud. The catastrophe of justice had truly descended, and humanity had no cards left to play. The battlefront was no longer a place for combat, but a gaping maw of hell swallowing everything. Slabs of rock that were once the ground were torn into countless floating chunks, spinning wildly like fragments of a disintegrating planet. Below, glowing red cracks, running like the Earth's exposed blood vessels, spewed heat, ash, and tiny sparks of fire shooting into the air. The air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and a metallic tang like scorched blood, making every inhalation feel like drawing in hot sand. The Z-team had been knocked from every foothold. Those who once charged forward fearing neither heaven nor earth were now mere tattered shadows amidst a sea of dust. Some lay motionless from severe injuries, others struggled on through sheer will, but their bodies rebelled, possessing no more ki to flare up. A few weak energy sources flickered like dying embers, not a sign of a counterattack but a sign of survival trying to cling to the final thread. Goku was at the edge of a broken rock slope, his hands propped against the debris, his shoulders heavy as if weighed down by the entire sky. The ultimate state he had once reached had abandoned him, leaving behind a hollow and numb body. Every movement now felt like dragging a block of iron. Every attempt to stand brought a stinging pain deep into his bones. His gaze remained fixed on the center of the battlefield, but instead of burning with fire, it was clouded by the weary lucidity of someone who had tried everything. Vegeta stood not far away, his back straight out of proud habit, but his legs trembled slightly like a pillar on the verge of collapsing. Shattered armor plates revealed bruises and deep cuts. He maintained silence, but that silence was no longer an attitude of disdain. It was like an effort to deny what was glaringly obvious. They were on the brink of true defeat. In his sharp, cold eyes, a flicker of tension mixed with helplessness passed through, then was suppressed by the will of his pride. Piccolo leaned against a rock, his green skin turning gray from exhaustion. He tried to control his breathing, drawing each breath like pulling a frayed string. Gohan knelt, his hands trembling with pain, his eyes still trying to watch, as if merely looking could keep everything from collapsing. Android 17 and 18 no longer held their composed posture. One leaned against the rock, eyes alert but body covered in cracks and scorch marks, while the other stood nearby, ready but with nothing left to unleash. Krillin, Yamcha, Tien, and the others had been forced into the role of witnesses, people who could only clench their fists in despair, knowing they could not make a difference. The sky seemed to lower, as if pulled down by someone, not because of clouds, but because of the pressure of the one standing in the center of the battlefield, Jiren. He stood there like a tower of destruction, not needing to move yet still causing the space around him to warp. Dust particles flying near him were crushed, floating fragments of rock vibrated before shattering into powder. The light around him was unstable, as if the colors themselves were being crushed by his weight into dark tones. Viewed from a distance, Jiren resembled a perfect creature of combat, motionless stance, broad shoulders, muscles like rock. But the closer one looked, the more one could see something on that body that did not belong to victory. Along his chest and arms, glowing red cracks appeared like magma fissures beneath his gray skin. Initially, they were as thin as threads, but now they had spread, overlapping like a spiderweb. At some points, they were no longer just streaks of light but opened up into actual cracks, oozing a thick, black liquid, viscous like tar. That black blood fell to the stone ground, smoking and corroding the earth, creating a small but gruesome sizzling sound. Every time Jiren gathered his strength, the cracks flared up like wind being blown into a furnace, then flickered out like a fire starved of oxygen. No one fully understood it, but everyone felt it. Jiren was powerful in an unnatural way, and that unnaturalness was collecting its debt. The moment of the end came like a slow blade. Jiren raised his hand, palm facing the sky, and before it, a dark point appeared. It did not look like an energy ball, but rather like a puncture in reality. Around it, light was bent, the air swirled, and stone dust was sucked in and vanished. Sound within that range was swallowed, leaving behind a terrifying void. The dark point grew larger, heavier, like a nucleus of destruction being compressed. The Z team sensed something unmistakable. This was not an attack to threaten, but an attack to erase. Not only erasing people, but erasing the place itself, erasing every way back. Earth seemed to be standing before a door being slammed shut by a sledgehammer. Those still conscious reacted by instinct. Some tried to compress their ki even if only a drop remained. Others tried to stand up even though their knees were about to break. But they were all like wet matchsticks before a storm. The more they struggled, the more their efforts exposed the hopelessness. In that moment, a strange sound intruded, sharp and clear like metal tapping on glass, a communication signal. It rang out of place, like a fire alarm bell amidst a collapsing field. Immediately after, from the distance, a blue streak appeared, tearing through the curtain of ash and dust. A small spaceship rushed in at unimaginable speed, weaving through spinning rock fragments, avoiding pillars of fire and pressure zones, as if the pilot had memorized every flow of the battlefield. The spaceship braked abruptly in midair, creating a gust of wind that whipped the ash and dust away, revealing the ship's hatch opening like a laboratory door in the middle of hell. Bulma stepped out, her white coat fluttering, her eyes focused to the point of coldness. There was no sign of panic, only the tension of someone who had raced against time and bet with their intellect. Bulma's appearance did not bring combat energy, but it brought something else, the power of information. In a war where everyone believed only power could decide, Bulma brought the thing that made even the strongest pause, a truth that could kill from the inside. The spaceship's speaker system was activated, and Bulma's voice echoed across the battlefield, not as a plea, but like a needle stabbing straight into the one holding the power of decision. Her words did not need to be beautiful, nor did they need to be polite. They needed to hit the mark. It forced Jiren's attention away from the destructive attack, at least for a heartbeat. Jiren turned his head. His gaze was cold and heavy, enough to make an ordinary person collapse. But Bulma did not back down. She directed her entire focus toward the only weakness the battlefield had overlooked. Jiren's body was showing signs of decay. Bulma delivered a judgment before the entire battlefield, and she anchored it with clear evidence. The magma cracks on Jiren's chest were spreading and oozing black blood. That was not a wound from a strike, but a symptom. She did not speak with emotion. She spoke as if presenting analysis results before a scientific council. The power core Jiren was using was actually an experimental prototype, leaking energy radiation. It could push power to absurd levels, but the price was incinerating cells, destroying tissue, and causing the body to disintegrate from the inside. The more one forced the power, the more one burned oneself. The moment that truth was thrown out, the thing that changed was not Jiren's face, but the rhythm of the ki fluctuating around him. The dark point of destruction before his palm trembled slightly, like a stable system being disrupted. He looked down at his body, and for the first time on that always motionless face, a strange moment appeared, the realization of an undeniable crack. Black blood still oozed, smoke still rose. Even if he wanted to deny it, his body was speaking for him. Bulma did not stop at exposing the truth. She had come here not to argue, but to change the variables. She pulled from the spaceship a heavy black suitcase, covered in glowing blue security locks. With just a few quick manipulations, the locks popped open, and the suitcase lid opened like opening a mini laboratory in the middle of the battlefield. Pure white light spilled out, not harsh but gentle, like moonlight reflecting on ice. Inside, the suitcase was a sphere of absolute white, the complete Omega core. Its surface had geometric patterns running in circles, like a structure designed to balance every energy flow to maintain stability under pressure that a prototype core could not withstand. The white core looked so clean it felt out of place, like a piece of purity brought to confront the decay. The presence of the white core shifted the perception of the entire battlefield. The exhausted warriors could still feel a stable and deep level of energy, completely different from the violent energy leaking from Jiren's body. It was like a silent ocean, not noisy, not ostentatious, but infinite. However, a barrier immediately appeared like a slap in the face. Goku and Vegeta no longer had enough strength to perform the fusion dance. The movements requiring synchronization, strength, and a stable breathing rhythm all were beyond their limits at this moment. The seemingly perfect turnaround plan suddenly faced the risk of premature death due to a physical detail. In the moment Bulma stood amidst the hot wind and ash, the suitcase opening like a challenge to fate, another beam of light appeared above the battlefield. Kaioshin appeared from the void of the spiritual realm, his face tense. He brought with him the Potara earrings, a tool for fast and decisive fusion, requiring no dance, no preparation time. The Potara fell through the air, spinning lightly like 2 drops of jade. In that moment, everything became strangely silent, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Goku and Vegeta caught the earrings in a state of half-consciousness, half-instinct. Vegeta's pride screamed in protest, but a glancing look at Bulma, who had just bet with intellect and recklessness along with the figure of Jiren preparing to erase everything, forced that pride down. This was not the time to win with ego, this was the time to survive. The earrings were put on. A suction force erupted like 2 colliding stars. The surrounding air contracted. Light formed into a pillar of energy swirling straight up into the sky, slicing through the curtain of dust. Floating rock fragments were flung away, the hot wind pushed back. That pillar of light was both violent and perfect, like a chemical reaction occurring at the exact ratio. When the light faded, Vegito appeared in the center of the battlefield. This fusion was not merely a summation of power, it was a new order. Vegito's stance possessed both the composure of one who understood the game and the cold sharpness of one ready to finish it. In that aura, the Z fighters sensed something that had been lost throughout the battle: the initiative. Vegito advanced toward the suitcase as if he already knew it was the final puzzle piece. Bulma, from the spaceship door, held the white core with an energy gripper and transferred it over. The moment the white core reached Vegito's hand, white light reflected onto his skin, making his entire silhouette appear outlined by a soft layer of silver. Instead of using it with the caution of a laboratory, Vegito chose the way of the battlefield, direct, absolute. He crushed the white core. There was no explosion, only a shattering into countless particles of white light, like crushed stardust. Those particles did not scatter, they were sucked straight into Vegito's body, seeping through the skin, flooding into the blood vessels, weaving into every cell. Vegito's entire body emitted a gentle white aura, unlike the explosive aura usually seen, but rather like a stable layer of luminous mist, both soft and sharp. The atmosphere around him changed, ash and dust were pushed away, and nearby magma veins seemed to calm, not because they were extinguished, but because they were suppressed by an order of energy. This was the perfect plot twist moment. While Jiren was powering up with a self-destructing prototype core, Vegito had just absorbed a stable, complete core. The scales did not just tip, they reversed. Jiren reacted immediately. The ki around him flared up blazing red, as if he were burning up whatever remained to crush the one who had just appeared. The magma cracks on his body flared brightly, spreading faster. Black blood oozed out more heavily, smoking like hot tar. He tried to compress the destructive attack once more, forcing the dark point before his hand into a denser, more violent mass, and launched it. The attack rushed forward so fast that the air exploded behind it, but Vegito did not dodge. He met it with a minimalist movement. The white aura layer around him held back the attack like holding back a flood, forcing it to twist and destabilize. The black-red energy collided with the white order, and the result was not an explosion, but disintegration. The destructive attack was ground into fragments and then vanished like ash in the wind. The The warriors who were still conscious all felt a shiver run down their spines, not out of fear, but because they had just witnessed something that throughout the battle no one thought possible. Jiren's power could be neutralized cleanly. Vegito stepped forward. With every step placed down, the ground trembled slightly. The rock fragments floating around him no longer spun wildly. They seemed to be re-stabilized, falling down in a lighter trajectory. The energy order of the white core turned the area around him into a zone of stability amidst the chaos. The battle shifted to a new rhythm, the rhythm of a hunt. Jiren rushed in at terrifying speed, his body like a living bullet. But Vegito responded with precision. No need for 100 strikes, just the right point. Vegito's first counterattack struck the chest area where magma cracks were crisscrossed. The heavy sound of collision rang out like suppressed thunder. Jiren's body arched, and black blood spurted out more violently, shooting in streams before falling to the ground, hissing as it corroded the rock. That was not just a strike, it was a test. Vegito was striking at the weakness created by the prototype core, and it was effective. Jiren took a step back, just one step, but it was his first step back. For one who always stood like a statue, that backward step was a crack in his authority. The Z-team saw that like seeing the first ray of light after a long night. Piccolo clenched his fists, his eyes never leaving the battle. Gohan tried to force himself up, pain no longer the only thing in his head. Hope had returned, and hope made one endure pain better. Android 17 narrowed his eyes in analysis, realizing that this time the battle was no longer a hopeless contest of strength. It was a solvable math problem. Bulma, at the spaceship door, no longer had her usual teasing look. She was focused like a scientist, observing a chemical reaction at extreme temperature. Just a small error could cause an explosion. She looked at the white layer of light around Vegito, looked at how it stabilized space, and inside she was both proud and afraid. Proud because her invention was saving the world, afraid because that invention was being absorbed in a way the laboratory had never dared to test. Kaioshin observed from above with his own worry. The Potara fusion and the white core were two massive variables stacked upon each other. If the White Order was stable enough to suppress a destructive attack, it could also create an unpredictable reaction if pushed too far. But no one had the luxury of caution. They only had the luxury of a quick victory. Jiren did not collapse immediately. He was the type of person who did not break easily. He gathered his strength, trying to compensate for the disintegration with sheer will. The red key around him flared up, shaking the very ground. But the more it flared, the more the cracks spread, like a vase having boiling water poured into its fissures. Black blood oozed out more heavily, and each drop seemed to drag with it a portion of burnt vitality. Vegito capitalized on that. He did not rush in frantically. He forced Jiren to increase his own power, to make the prototype core within him overload itself. Every time Jiren tried to get stronger, Vegito blocked him with the White Order, forcing the red-black energy to crash into a stable wall, causing it to recoil back onto Jiren's body like a short-circuiting current. The rhythm of the battle turned into a spiral. The more Jiren struggled, the more he burned himself. The calmer Vegito remained, the more he suppressed his opponent. That was the difference between chaotic power and designed power. While the two standing at the peak confronted each other, the surrounding battlefield continued to collapse. Large slabs of rock fell like meteorites, swept off course by hot winds. Columns of fire spewed up and then extinguished, leaving behind trails of black smoke. A few warriors still capable of moving had to drag themselves away, not to flee, but to avoid being crushed by the environment itself. In a corner, Krillin tried to pull an injured person into a sheltered area, using trembling hands to temporarily bandage the wound. 18 stood guard in front, not flaring large ki, but using small energy pushes to block incoming rubble. Tien tried to erect a barrier, even though it was as thin as paper, but just being thin was enough to save a life for a few seconds. Those small actions did not change the main battle, but they created the feeling that the Z-team was still a team. Not just two people carrying everything, but everyone trying to keep the rest of the world from collapsing. Bulma watched that scene, her heart feeling both a sting and a burn. All those familiar faces, all the times they laughed, argued, and then rushed into danger out of habit now lay within a cruel picture. And if Vegito failed, everything would end. There would be no next time. Vegito accelerated. The layer of white light around him grew thicker, not blinding but dense like thick mist. He closed in on Jiren, and every strike seemed to press exactly where the red-black energy was leaking. No need for showmanship, only efficiency. Jiren was forced to defend in a way he was not accustomed to. For the first time, absolute dominance turned into desperate resistance. Jiren tried to recreate the dark point of destruction, but this time it was no longer stable. It vibrated, distorted, like a heart beating out of rhythm. Red-black energy was pulled in and then repelled out, causing his very arm to tremble. The cracks on his chest flared bright then went dark, like error lights on a device about to burn out. Vegito saw that and pressed further. The White Order gave Jiren no time to settle. It did not allow him to recover. It did not allow him to control. This was a battle of rhythm, and Vegito held the rhythm. In the moment, Jiren tried to pour all his strength into a counterattack. The cracks on his chest widened to the point where every deep red crevice of light was visible. Black blood oozed out in small streams, smoking. His body frozen for a beat, a very short beat, but for those at that level, one beat was enough to decide everything. Vegito seized that beat. The layer of white light around him contracted then burst out like a wave, not destroying the environment but pushing everything away, creating a static void in the center. In that static void, Vegito unleashed a decisive strike, focusing the entire White Order into a single point, like a drill piercing through the final layer of armor. The strike hit exactly where the prototype core within Jiren was reacting. The collision created a sound not like an explosion, but like glass cracking under extreme pressure. The magma cracks on Jiren's body flared bright then flashed off continuously. Black blood sprayed out violently, but no longer like normal liquid. It shot out like a leaking stream of energy. Jiren still stood, but he stood like a pillar that had been hollowed out from the inside. The Z-Team felt that moment like feeling a phase-shifting earthquake. Piccolo held his breath. Gohan forgot the pain. 17 leaned forward as if ready to rush into support if needed, even knowing he was just like a grain of sand. Bulma unconsciously took a step forward at the spaceship door, as if wanting to pull herself closer to the result. Jiren tried to raise his hand again, trying to hold onto the power of destruction, but the dark point before his palm refused to obey. It vibrated, distorted, then shrank as if strangled by its own instability. The truth Bulma exposed had now become a death sentence. The prototype core was burning him from the inside, and every time he tried to surpass his limits, it demanded his life even more. Vegito stood opposite, the layer of white light still stable. There was no sign of fatigue commensurate with what was happening, as if the white core did not just increase power but also optimized every expenditure. The White Order turned the fused body into a nearly perfect fighting machine. Minimal waste, minimal leakage, minimal error. In the strangely quiet atmosphere before the next collision, a new sensation spread across the battlefield. The feeling that the end no longer belonged to Jiren. It had been stolen by intellect, by a suitcase, by a white core, and by a decision to wear earrings in the final moment. However, the conclusion was not yet sealed, because someone like Jiren does not collapse in a normal way. He could choose to burn up all the rest of himself like a dying star, dragging everything down with him. And that was the most dangerous thing. When someone knows they are about to lose, they can choose to ensure no one wins. Vegito read that through the rhythm of the fluctuations. The layer of white light around him grew thicker, like an invisible armor preparing to withstand a final frantic strike. The Z-Team in the distance felt the pressure increase again, but this time the pressure was no longer a one-way dominance. It was like two equal masses pushing against each other, creating a zone of tension that made space tremble. Bulma stared at Jiren. She did not need dialogue to know what he could do. She had seen out-of-control reactions in the laboratory. When a system is about to break, it can explode. Jiren, with the leaking prototype core, could turn himself into a living explosion. Kaioshin also sensed that and tensed up. Patara was a strong fusion, but if the opponent self-destructed, everything could turn into a disaster. And the white core, though stable, did not guarantee safety against a space-destroying explosion. Vegito took another step, closing the distance, not giving Jiren time to prepare for a destructive suicide. This was the tactic of someone who understood that sometimes the best defense is the fastest finish. The layer of white light around him did not flare out uselessly. It contracted, concentrated, like an invisible blade sharpened by order. In that moment, the battlefield seemed to slow down. Ash and dust hovered, rubble fell slowly. The observers all felt that time was being stretched by the massive level of energy, and in the center, two opposing entities stood facing each other. On one side was leaking power that was burning itself up. On the other was pure power that was stabilizing and suppressing. The episode, if viewed through the narrative rhythm, had gone from despair to hope, not through a muscular rescue, but through an intellectual turnaround. Bulma had turned what was once the villain's absolute advantage into a fatal weakness. And Vegito had turned that invention into combat power in the blink of an eye. The remaining question was not who was stronger, but who would be in time to finish it before the final catastrophe flared up. The energy zone between them compressed like a spring. One more beat, and everything would explode in one of two directions. Either Jiren would collapse completely because of the prototype core self-destructing, or he would drag the entire battlefield into a frenzied explosion. The Z team at the edge of the battlefield held their breath. Bulma clenched her hands until they turned white. Kaioshin held his position, ready to intervene with magic if there was a thin opening. Vegito stood still, the layer of white light stable like a statement needing no words. Order had returned, and it was preparing to pass judgment. Ash and dust still hung suspended like a curtain, refusing to fall. The battlefront after Vegito's reversal was not quiet at all. On the contrary, it resembled a furnace being compressed to the limit. Space trembled, light distorted at the edges, and rock fragments large and small drifted slowly as if swimming in an invisible liquid. The only difference compared to a few minutes ago was that the sense of initiative had changed hands. The power of decision no longer lay in the hands of the one preparing to erase the Earth, but within the sturdy stance of a fused entity radiating white order. Jiren stood opposite, still towering like a giant block of stone, but inside that block, the sound of cracking had appeared. The magma cracks on his body lit up in an uneven rhythm, like the error indicator lights of an overloaded generator. Black blood oozed out more heavily, no longer just a few drops, but forming thin, smoking streams. His power was still great enough to make the environment cringe, but every time he pushed a little harder, his own body paid the price with an invisible crack, a swallowed pain, a portion of tissue burnt to ash from the inside. Vegito took another step. The white aura around him was as thick as mist, as stable as a wall, and as silent as a verdict. The white core had turned him into a center of balance amidst the chaos. Ash and dust flying near him were pushed aside, and rock fragments falling near him changed trajectory as if controlled by a new law. Without needing to explode, he still made the battlefield yield the way. At the far edge, the Z team dragged themselves into positions where they could observe without being crushed by the aftershocks. Piccolo drew a deep breath, keeping his body from collapsing. Gohan struggled to stand straight so his eyes wouldn't miss the decisive moment. Android 17 looked like he was calculating survival probabilities every second. 18 and Krillin shielded the injured from rubble. Tien tried to erect a thin barrier in an area prone to collapse. None had the strength left to fight, but they remained present as witnesses to the finishing battle that they themselves had contributed a small part to maintaining until the final minute. Bulma stood at the spaceship door, her gaze locked onto Vegito. She had seen the white core operate in a way never tested, and she understood that stability was not free. Every system, no matter how complete, has limits. The only difference was that its limit was pushed so far that ordinary people would think it infinite. But with a prolonged battle, with collisions that shook reality itself, that limit would sooner or later be reached. If it had to end fast, before perfection became overload. Kaioshin floated above, tense as a taut string. The Potara had created Vegito, the white core had raised Vegito to another level, but that very resonance made everything a double-edged sword. The spirit realm could correct some incidents, but it could not turn off a destruction-level explosion if it happened right in the center. And then, the final brutality of the one about to lose appeared. Jiren no longer maintained the combat rhythm of a top-tier warrior. He entered a glitch state in the truest sense, a machine with broken controls, leaving only the function to discharge. The pressure around him spiked then dropped, like a heart in arrhythmia. The magma cracks flared up, dragging along waves of pain that could not be hidden. But instead of retreating, he grasped onto the pain like grasping onto fuel, turning it into madness. Jiren's first strike in that state was no longer a targeted strike. It was a rain of destruction. Black-red energy beams shot out in all directions, plowing through rubble, gouging out space, creating tears like a monster scratches on a glass surface. In some places, the collision was strong enough to leave behind dark holes, like temporary punctures in reality that had not yet healed. The battlefield turned into a chaotic picture, where each line of red-black light could be a death sentence for anyone standing in the wrong place. The Z-team was forced to huddle behind the weak barrier. Bulma's spaceship shook from the shockwaves, the stabilization system screeched, the ship's door emitted warning sounds. Bulma still did not leave her position, but her hand gripped the doorframe until it turned white. Amidst that rain of destruction, Vegito did not rush forward. He did not dodge, he walked. Each of his footsteps was like nailing a law into the battlefield. The law that chaos cannot touch the center of order. The red-black energy beams rushed in, touching the ivory-white aura around his body, and instead of exploding, they were bent in direction, curved in rhythm, like floodwaters being guided into a canal. Some beams were compressed thin, then dissolved into light dust like ash. Some beams were elongated, then deformed into soft curves, losing their fangs. Some beams were stopped dead, halting as if frozen in midair, then disintegrating into tiny particles that fell down. That was no longer normal defense. It resembled manipulating reality. The difference lay in the sensation. Jiren's energy was hot, harsh, stabbing the eyes like a blade, while Vegito's white order was gentle, yet sharp in a cold way. It did not hit back, it rewrote. It did not explode, it edited. When a stream of red-black fire rolled in like a storm, Vegito simply stepped through it like stepping through a curtain of rain. The fire touched the zone of white order, suddenly splitting into thin pieces like flower petals, spinning lightly in the air before falling. Against the backdrop of hell, those energy petals sparkled for a second before dissolving, creating a moment absurdly beautiful amidst the destruction. It was a scene that made every observer forget to breathe. Destruction transformed into beauty simply by a calm footstep. The more frenzied Jiren became, the more he pushed himself into the saw blade. The magma cracks on his body spread further, expanding like pried-open wounds. Black blood gushed out, emitting thick smoke. In the chest area, where the prototype core caused the strongest reaction, red-black light flashed continuously like a light bulb about to burn out. His body began to have uncontrolled twitches, a sign of the system disintegrating. But Jiren still did not stop. His corrupted state did not allow stopping, it only allowed discharging until it broke. Vegito continued to advance. The closer he got, the calmer he became. And when the distance was short enough, he did not speed up like a hasty warrior. He upgraded his very presence. The ivory-white aura around him thickened, the light spreading out like a tide. His hair spiked up more, and then a strange transformation occurred. The hair strands did not turn gold or black, but became transparent like crystal, as if light passed through without being tinted. Each hair strand resembled a thin crystal shard, reflecting ash and lava like reflecting a burning world in a glass surface. His outfit also changed accordingly. The familiar martial arts GI seemed to be rewritten by the White Order. Fabric turned into solid energy, lines turned into armor structures. On his body appeared a suit of ancient Roman warrior armor, but not made of metal. It was made of white light, with faint patterns carved as if sculpted from mist. On his shoulders and chest, the armor plates shone softly and stably, as if cast from the white core itself. Behind his back, a floating halo appeared. Unlike the usual divine halo, it resembled a symbol of authority, a seal of order. In that moment, Vegito was no longer a mere fused warrior. He became an icon, a war god of order, standing amidst chaos and forcing it to bow down. At the same time, the feeling on the battlefield shifted completely. Jiren's pressure was still heavy, but it seemed to be distorted by a greater law. Rock fragments floating near Omega Vegito no longer spun wildly. They hovered in a circle, as if arranged. Ash and dust in the area around him fell slowly, like snow falling in a quiet room. And in the center, Omega Vegito looked at Jiren like looking at a fever, something that needed to be cooled down, not feared. Jiren responded with a desperate explosion. The red-black energy around him surged, turning him into a humanoid magma furnace. From his back, a deformation appeared. Energy structures like demon wings sprouted, not because he intentionally shaped them, but because the faulty core was discharging energy in a distorted manner. Those wings were long, sharp, and tattered, like blades of black fire, flapping powerfully to create tears in space. That spectacle was both majestic and grotesque. The strongest one had become a monster of his own desire for power, bearing on his back demon wings born of a system error. Jiren rushed forward, possessing no tactics left, only the instinct to tear. The demon wings swept out, creating red-black cutting lines that clawed through space, leaving tears like scars. Energy beams shot out wildly, adding to the chaos. Everything around was torn apart, not into rubble, but into voids. Omega Vegito still did not dodge. He stepped between the tears, and reality around him healed itself like a wound stitched with light. The red-black cutting lines touching the zone of white order immediately lost their color and heat, transforming into soft ribbons of light like silk, then dissolving into sparkling dust. When Jiren fired a stream of energy as thick as a pillar of fire, Omega Vegito did not block it with a punch or a shield. He manipulated reality. The red-black pillar of fire was fractured into hundreds of small shards, then each shard curled up, blooming into energy flower petals drifting away. Destruction transformed into slowly falling petals, and in a split second, the battlefield resembled a bizarre garden sprouting upon the foundation of hell. That was a humiliation to Jiren's madness. And the madness screamed even louder. Omega Vegito decided to conclude this spectacle as an ultimate declaration. He raised one hand, and around him appeared 10 Omega swords. They were not drawn from scabbards, nor was there the sound of metal. They were born of white light, long, straight, and thin like the blade of the moon. Each sword hovered at a different angle, pointing its tip at Jiren like 10 destinies. The swords vibrated slightly, as if waiting for a command. Then, in a single rhythm, they shot forward. There was no loud sound of tearing wind. They glided through the air like silent flashes of lightning. They did not slash into the body in the manner of cutting flesh. They slashed into the energy structure. Each stroke was a line of rewriting, a precise line of separation. 6 of Jiren's demon wings were slashed off in a sequence of movements so fast that the naked eye only caught glimpses of white streaks cutting across, before the energy wings fell and dissolved into black dust. Imbalance immediately appeared. Jiren stumbled for a beat, not because losing the wings caused a loss of physical balance, but because he lost the channels to discharge energy. The faulty core inside him was forced to discharge through another path. Through his body, the magma cracks flared violently. Black blood surged out like a stream, smoking more heavily. The pain turned into convulsive jerks. Jiren resembled a capped volcano, pressure accumulating with no escape. The Z team watched that scene with a complex feeling, wanting to finish it, yet realizing that before them was no longer a simple villain, but someone suffering the consequences of his own greed. In that moment, the destruction was no longer beautiful, it was pitiable in a chilling way. Omega Vegito approached slowly, as if not wanting to trigger the suicide explosion. He could sever, could crush, could erase. But the most unexpected choice took shape: to save. Because the faulty core was the thing killing Jiren, not just the opponent's attacks. If the core were pulled out, the madness would cease. If the core were crushed, the disaster would stop. This was not just an execution, this was surgery. Omega Vegito retracted the Omega swords, leaving them hovering behind him like 10 needles being put away. He walked straight into the red-black energy zone, flaring like hellfire. The ivory-white aura around him expanded like a cloak, pushing back the heat. The energy beams shooting out from Jiren touching the white zone immediately turned into scattered falling petals, as if the reality around Omega Vegito had become a court where violence was transformed into harmlessness. Then, Omega Vegito rushed forward, not with a thrust showing off strength, but with a movement as precise and decisive as a surgeon inserting a scalpel. His arm reached straight out, his bare hand piercing through Jiren's chest exactly where the faulty core was causing the strongest reaction. There was no red blood, only smoking black blood pushed out by the white order. Omega Vegito's hand grasped a scorching red-black object, convulsing like a diseased heart. Just touching it would be enough to incinerate an ordinary person. But Omega Vegito held it like holding a lump of coal within a furnace. Because the white order around him locked away every leak, he yanked hard. The red-black core was pulled from Jiren's chest, dragging with it a frenzied discharge of energy. The space around them shook, and a tear appeared like the mouth of an abyss. But Omega Vegito did not allow it to grow. The ivory-white aura pressed in, patching it shut, like a hand gagging a monster. The red-black core lay in his hand, convulsing violently. Then he crushed it. The sound was not an explosion, but a low thud, like a heart being crushed within a chest. The red-black light flashed one last time, then snuffed out completely. The shards of black energy dissolved like ash, decomposed by the white aura into harmless particles and dropped onto the battlefield floor like dust. Immediately, Jiren lost his power. The red-black explosion vanished like a fire deprived of oxygen. The magma cracks on his body darkened, no longer glowing. Black blood stopped surging, only trickling lightly like the final trace of a withdrawing toxin. The remaining demon wings vanished. His body shrank back to its normal state, no longer possessing the pressure to crush space. He fell, not falling like a meteorite, but falling like a person exhausted after a fever. His body hit the ground, and dust rose in a small ring. He lay there, his chest heaving heavily, as if he had just escaped a death of his own making. The battlefield fell silent for a long beat. Ash and dust truly fell. Floating rock fragments lost their lifting force and began to fall according to normal gravity. The tears in space healed, and light returned to its familiar straight lines. The Earth, having just stood on the brink of erasure, suddenly regained its right to exist. But the quiet did not last, for the price of perfection began to collect its debt. Omega Vegito stood upright, but the ivory-white aura around him trembled slightly. The energy Roman armor shimmered as if suffering interference. The halo behind his back flickered. His transparent crystal hair vibrated like glass encountering a loud sound. The white core had done its duty, had stabilized, had rewritten, had saved. And now, after pulling out the red-black core and crushing it, the system reached its overload threshold. White energy began to leak out of Omega Vegito like mist drifting backward. It was not a dangerous leak, but like something being returned to the void. The halo behind his back faded. The energy armor developed cracks of light, not cracks like fracturing, but like dissolving into dust. In the next beat, the fusion began to lose stability. The White Order held Omega Vegito's body like holding a statue in the wind, but the wind had become so strong that the statue could not stand forever. The Potara had fused two souls, the white core had lifted them up, but as the white core dissolved, the stabilizing glue disappeared. Omega Vegito separated. The white light flared up once more like a small pillar, then subsided. When the light dissipated, Goku and Vegeta appeared, each taking a staggering step as if just pulled from a torrent. They were still exhausted, but this was the exhaustion following victory. On their bodies, old wounds remained, but the apocalyptic pressure no longer weighed them down. At the same time, the white core also vanished into the void like a wisp of mist that had completed its mission. No white object remained, no pure light hovering. Only a sense of stability remained, imprinted onto reality like a seal that had been set. In the distance, Toppo and Dispo appeared, rushing toward Jiren. They no longer bore a destructive aura. They carried the panic and worry of teammates watching their leader lying there gasping for breath. They helped Jiren up, propping him against a rock. Jiren was still breathing heavily, his eyes looking down at his own body like someone who had just woken from a long coma and realized the cause of his near death was not the opponent, but himself. The realization was evident in that posture. Greed for power had driven him to use a flawed product, and that flaw had corroded him to the brink of death. Power was no longer something he held. It was something that almost took him away. The Z-Team watched that scene with no remaining desire to crush them. They were tired, they were in pain, they were angry, but they also understood they had just prevented a catastrophe whose root cause was the obsession with power. On the battlefield just past, violence had been conquered by order and the choice to stop at the right time. Toppo and Dispo helped Jiren to his feet. They looked toward the Z-Team, especially toward Goku and Vegeta, the two who had created Vegito and indirectly saved Jiren by extracting the faulty core. In a rare moment, hostility was gone. They bowed their heads, not bowing simply because of defeat, but bowing as an admission, There is a line between execution and salvation, and today that line was chosen in the less cruel direction. Then they flew up, carrying Jiren away from the ash-filled sky. 3 silhouettes gradually receded into small dots, disappearing toward outer space, leaving the battlefield to the survivors and the cracks that needed healing. When the tension dissolved, sighs burst out as if people had been holding their breath throughout the entire episode. Piccolo relaxed his shoulders. Gohan knelt down for a second, then gave a tired laugh. Android 17 looked around as if checking to see if reality was truly okay yet. Krillin slumped to the ground, his hands still trembling, but this time it was trembling from escaping death. Bulma turned down the speaker system, but still stood at the spaceship door like someone who had just run a marathon in a firestorm. She looked at Goku and Vegeta, looked at the battlefield just saved, then looked up at the sky where Jiren had disappeared. Her expression was no longer cold, it was a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and a bit of teasing, like the way she protected herself from overwhelming emotions. She winked, the familiar wink of someone who always wanted to turn tragedy into a joke to be able to breathe, like a light punctuation mark after heavy pages. And in that gesture, the entire episode 7 closed with a resonance that was very Bulma. Victory was not only due to muscle, but due to understanding what one was using and daring to bring it at the right time. Against the background of falling ash, the Earth still remained. The Z-Team was alive. The destroyer had been detoxified instead of erased. The white core had dissolved into the void like a god who had finished their duty. And amidst the ruins, what remained was not just victory or defeat, but a reminder: power not fully understood will become a curse, while intellect at the right time can bend even destiny. From Jiren's ambition for control to the rise of the divine Omega Vegito, the battle for the energy core has redefined the true meaning of justice. Jiren failed because he allowed dark power to consume his humanity, while Vegito triumphed through his burning desire to protect all life. As the darkness fades, Jiren departs Earth with a costly lesson. The greatest power is not born from solitude, but from connection. A new era of guardians has begun,